Hello, and welcome back to another episode of International Immersion, a podcast that seeks to capture the combined experiences of people, places, culture, traveling, current events, living abroad, and much, much more. So for today's episode, in respect of Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage, or API, this month, we thought it'd be a great idea to talk with some people from different backgrounds and go into depth and discuss a number of questions that impact how they feel, think, and in a way affects their identity. So for today's episode, I have 5 guests, all of which are from different backgrounds, all distinguished, have accomplished a lot, and have some very interesting stories to themselves. So to begin with, everyone, I'm glad you're all here today. It's great to have this event, and I'm really eager to hear about a lot of things you have to offer, your backgrounds, your experiences, and everything else. So without further ado, it'd be great to introduce all of you to our audience. So Amy, it'd be great if you want to go ahead and start.
Hi, Sean. Thank you for having us. This is Amy Lee here. I am the author of Snow in Vietnam, and I'm originally from Vietnam. I now live in Oklahoma City. And, my background is really about trying to navigate what life is like here in the U.S. as a Vietnamese refugee who actually came here with a congenital heart defect. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Do I just go next?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Angela. I'm originally from the Philippines and I'm currently based in Manila, but I was born and raised in Indonesia, so I would classify myself as a third culture kid. I grew up with a very sort of Western upbringing, very Western culture, but I'm still very close to my roots as a Filipino. Since being born and raised in Indonesia, I've lived in the UK, in Singapore, and in France as well. So I've been very fortunate to be able to see how many different cultures go about their day-to-day lives. And I find this topic very interesting. So thank you for having me on.
Hi, Sean. Thanks, everyone. My name's Callum Marshall. I'm half Japanese, born and raised in London, UK, and have been living in Japan for almost 2 years now. Probably for another 2 years.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, I guess similar to everyone here, I grew up in one place, but have ties to a strong cultural ties to another.
I'm Malia Ogawa. I am from Seattle originally. I'm half Japanese because both of my parents are half Japanese. So living in Japan, the Japanese I meet are always confused. But I'm also Hawaiian, and my parents are from Hawaii. So I was raised culturally way more Hawaiian than Japanese. I didn't really hit my Japanese roots until I started dating Callum. So we've been living here for almost 2 years. I've also lived in Paris and London, like Angela. In Illinois, which is close to Sean. So this is like my 4th country I've lived in. So I like seeing all the different cultures as well. And I identify more as mixed race. I identify as a Japanese American when I'm doing my Japanese American history, but in general, kind of mixed race.
And I'm Sarah M. I grew up in Cambodia. I lived in Cambodia up until I was 26. And then I left Cambodia. It's a long journey, but finally I arrived in the United States 40 years ago. So yeah, I'm the oldest in this group. I am an author of the book. This is my book. It's How I Survived the Killing Fields, because you probably remember the movie The Killing Fields. That was happening in Cambodia during my time in college. So I remember a lot and I forgot a lot. But the book, it just helped me to recollect what was happening and what did I learn from it. So now I'm an inspirational speaker and sharing my story, sharing my message, giving hope. So I live in Florida currently. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you all guys for the great introductions. And just between the five of you, the number of countries, places, and things where you've been, people you've met, your backgrounds, it's really neat to see how many different perspectives and experiences, just the five of you have done so far. So, I think it's interesting because, a lot of people, they're from a place, they're surrounded by their culture, people they know, but they don't have a lot of exposure to a lot of different places around the world and a lot of different people around the world. And that's one of the big purposes for this podcast and why I'm trying to raise awareness and just build more mutual affiliation and understanding of people around the world. Because at the end of the day, we're all pretty much the same, and if you get what I mean. So, to kind of to best, go into this, I prepared a list of questions that I think kind of give a good insight that everyone can kind of contribute to in their own way. So to begin the discussion phase of this episode, I want to start off with the first question. And, it's kind of a general one, but I think it's important to kind of set a basis. And the first one I want to ask all of you is, how does your heritage impact your point of view on life and how you interact with others? I know it's a bit deep, but in just a general way, maybe how would you approach that?
Wow. So this is Amy, and I, being Vietnamese, I can say that I'm still learning about my personal history, but it has opened my eyes a lot to how fragile life is, how resilient the human spirit can be. And, it doesn't really matter your background or your ethnicity, whether you're rich or poor, born in the US or somewhere else. It's like we all have these same struggles and fears. We have the same basic wants and needs. And for me, I just love connecting with people to understand their roots. And I think that's how my heritage impacts my point of view and how I interact with others, because I'm often misunderstood, so I want to dig deep and understand others, and somehow be a part of the same human progression, if that makes any sense.
No, very well said, Amy.
I would say that it's an interesting way to, it's interesting that you ask how your heritage impacts your point of view, because for me personally, having grown up not really being told that, or having grown up in such an international sort of environment, heritage was really not as important of a factor in shaping someone's identity. So growing up in an international school environment, we celebrated where other people were from and the differences in cultures. But at the end of the day, we were always told that we were all the same, and that at the end of the day, we all have to work together. We're all part of the same world. And I grew up in Indonesia, and the national motto for the country is unity and diversity. And that's something that my school also very much tried to espouse within its educational program. So I think in many ways, although it was a beautiful upbringing, it's also made the question of heritage and identity a little bit confusing, because if you're 4 or 5 years old and you're constantly being introduced to people from different places, it gives you a great understanding of others and sort of the commonalities between people. But when you sort of move out of that environment, you start to realize that sort of bubble is not the way it is in other places. And it's a shame, because it should be.
No, Angela, you bring up a great point there, in that it doesn't really matter. The factors around where you're from or how you're brought up can influence you. So, one thing by itself is not going to maybe be influential. It can be a host of things. And in your case, I think that's great. Everyone's taught that we're the same, we're equal, and then we appreciate where everyone's from. I wish more people had that mentality or would be exposed to that mentality.
How has my heritage affected? So I grew up in London, and I was one of the few people with Asian heritage in my year, predominantly Caucasian year group. My primary school was a bit more diverse, but essentially, I always felt I was always treated as the Asian kid in the group, which at times growing up, I wanted to reject that label. You know, I didn't want to be treated as the Asian kid. I wanted to be considered English because I felt English. I was born in England. I had never lived in Japan. But then I think the older you get, you realize how sort of negative that way of thinking is, and that you should embrace who you are. I'm half Japanese, but I'm actually, it's almost like I'm two things. I'm not less. I'm not two halves. I'm two whole aspects. But I think growing up biracial, especially coming to Japan, I've realized that I'm not either English or Japanese. In England, I'm often treated as more Japanese. In Japan, I'm treated more as English. So I sort of have to straddle that divide of being both things. And I think that's impacted me in the way I interact with people. I tend to be a bit more fluid, sort of maybe change aspects of my personality to suit the conversation, or maybe, I don't know, I find it easier to make friendships that way, but having a bit of a fluid identity, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, you know.
Maybe in one way you could say you learn how to code switch in a way, like from different places.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think to a smaller or greater level, we all do that in our societies. But like in your case, it's direct or more.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So growing up, I grew up in like a diverse community. There were a lot of different Asian people, all types: Korean, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Filipino, etc. And a lot of my friends were either, one of my best friends is half Ecuadorian, but she looks really white. I tan better than her. And I had other friends who were like Indian. There were lots of Indians, lots of Jewish people. And then I went to this Catholic all-girls school in Seattle, and there were a lot of Black girls. There were a lot of Asian girls. There were white girls. And people always saw me as like the Hawaiian, because that's how my family really identifies. Like if you ever go to our house, Angela's been there, you see like pineapples everywhere, like ukuleles. My brother and my dad always wear aloha shirts.
You give out leis at graduation?
Yeah, we give out leis at graduation. I have like a pineapple tribal tattoo. But it was when I went to Illinois, I became the Asian girl, even though I'm only half. And back when I was in high school, I'd bring up that I was Japanese, and I always got, "You're Japanese? I thought you were Hawaiian." And I was like, "You can be both." I'm also white. Mm-hmm. And so the Hawaiian aspect kind of disappeared when I went to Illinois, because there weren't that many Asian people there. And one thing I've noticed is, like, even though I don't look as Japanese as maybe like Callum does, white people would see me and make me like the token Asian person if I was in a place where there weren't a lot of Asian people. And Asian people would see me and think that I was just like Western. And then when I lived in London and Paris, they all kind of just saw me as an American, except for the white guys I dated, who were like, "Oh, I have yellow fever." Yeah, so I don't date white men anymore. So and then here in Japan, like, this is like, I'm a foreigner and I'm an American, but they're very interested to find out that I'm Japanese. And I've noticed that, for me at least, my students and other people seem to accept me more once they find out I'm Japanese. So I don't get treated like the white people. I don't get treated like the Black people. I don't get treated like the Japanese people. I don't get treated like the Southeast Asian people. I get like some weird little thing where I kind of fly under the radar, and people know that I'm like foreign, but doesn't really like other me as much. But then again, I can't speak Japanese like Callum can. So maybe they're othering me more in their language without me knowing. But they always find it like really interesting that I'm Japanese. Mm-hmm.
Well, you bring up another good point in how that perceptions in different places how they look at you. And, you know, living in Illinois myself, I can definitely attest to that, because, you know, I had an Asian girlfriend a while back, and from China, and when she came here, she would get so much attention, and it'd be a little like, guys, settle down. So yeah, it definitely, because it just predominantly where I'm from, it's mostly white Caucasian. So
yeah, it was a lot of ignorance too. They would say like, oh, you're Asian. What Chinese food should I order? Stuff like that. Like all Asians are the same. I'm like, okay.
Yes, from living in China for 4 years myself, I got a lot of that too. When I talk to people and say, "Oh, you live in China," I'm like, "No, they don't do that. Oh no, this food doesn't exist there." Kind of brushing aside a lot of those things. But it's just, it's at the end of the day, I don't get angry about it. I'm just saying, well, they haven't been there. They don't know anyone from there, so I'm not going to hold it against them, right, for any reason.
Well, I have an opportunity to live in my country longer than a lot of you, so. My experience slightly different. I'm pretty much settled into the culture. So let's see. I live in the countryside and with my family until I was 21 when I moved away to attend college, and then the Khmer communists came in. They basically shut down the country. But before that, I'm pretty much settled in the Cambodian tradition and the way of living. We value family unit. So family is very important, and we try to do everything possible to not to have any friction among our family, and we respect the older people and support each other. And what I remember is that the people are polite, kind, and compassionate to one another. And since the communists took over, I realized that the Cambodian people are still have a very strong tenacity and a resilient. A lot of people rebounds, pretty well. But as the whole, the country went through a nightmare for so long, and everything was destroyed. It's pretty hard to rebuild, but the people themselves are pretty resilient. But now that I'm here in the United States, yeah, I have a hard time assimilating to the community. But I did not regret about being here. I did not hold the community against me. I have a lot of good things. I have wonderful church group that support me when I first came. So I'm so grateful that they express their love, their support. So I have all kinds. I'm just choose to pick the positive side of things. So that's how I can live happy and healthy, and now to remind of the horrible situation back in my country.
No, very well said, Sarah. And I think that speaks to a very important thing, is that I think we all should try to focus on the positives. We can't always ignore the negatives, and you never should. You need to deal with them. But at the same time, I think the more positive your mindset is, and the more positive you are in your outlook and how you perceive things, the better your life's going to be, and it's going to be better for society in general. Because, let's face it, no one wants to be around a negative person in any regard or any aspect. So, no, very well said, and I really like all the different insights. And that leads on to the next question I have is, how closely do you follow your traditions, or do you deviate or modify them to fit your current situation, personality, and or lifestyle? I know it's a little concentrated, but I think it's kind of interesting to see maybe what degrees we all have here in that.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm still trying to understand what it means to be Vietnamese. I came here to the United States when I was 5 years old. I was an itty bitty. So it wasn't until when my mom passed that I really started to dig deep and unearth my heritage, right? So my mom, she used to have a veneration table to honor her parents, and she would burn incense on special occasions. She would have their photos hanging on the wall, and she would place food. She would slave all day cooking food and put it as an offering and do prayers and that kind of stuff. And so that's one tradition that I have continued to do, and that is ancestor worship, even though I'm not Buddhist. I'm actually Catholic, although a very poor one. I still honor my mom by doing that, and I love to cook now. And if you follow me on Facebook or anywhere else, you'll see I do a lot of postings of food because that's one way I can honor my mom. And so, yeah, even though I don't have a clue sometimes as to what the traditions are, and I just kind of make things up to fit my personality. And I think the most important thing is it doesn't have to be proper etiquette necessarily, but it's your attempt and you're trying. I'm a 1.5 generation Vietnamese refugee, and things are going to get diluted eventually. I mean, my son, he burns the incense, and you're supposed to put it like all the way to your forehead, and you do a deep bow. He just does this little wand thing, like he's doing sparklers, and he's done. But he still does it. And so, yeah. Anyways, that's my answer.
I would say that for me, tradition in the Philippines is very closely related to religion. So a lot of the sort of the traditions that I follow, that was raised with, have to do with Catholicism, and about family values in general. I think I can say that in general in Asia, family is very important. So those were the sorts of traditions that I grew up with, sort of respecting your elders and appreciating what your family means and what they can do for you. And I was very fortunate that my parents were very open-minded. So when I was being raised, being overseas in an international school, my parents were always very clear about the fact that we were foreigners in another country and we should be respectful towards the country that we're in. So even if at home we spoke English and we're Filipino, my parents insisted that I learn the local language, and that when I interact with people in Indonesia, that you pay the appropriate respects to that sort of tradition. So I would say that in general, my traditions are kind of influenced by many different cultures, but when it comes down to what I do with my family, it's usually based around religion, which isn't, specific to a country. It's specific to that religion, and it being Catholic, it's more Western, and potentially more strict in some aspects. But as I mentioned, my parents were very open-minded, so they were very happy for my brother, and I have an older brother, to sort of mold these traditions to fit our own personalities and our own preferences. So they never forced anything on us, and just encourage us to just be respectful. I would say that when it comes to the traditions, it was just the traditions of religion without necessarily imposing that religion upon us. So just things like respect your family, be respectful towards others, and try to be a good person.
No, I think that's great. And I think it's good that you had parents that were open-minded and encouraged you to, to learn and to kind of find your own equilibrium in a way.
Traditions. This is a bit of a hard one for me, because I think a lot of the traditions that I have become unconscious. I don't really think about them. So some of the ones that come to mind are, classic, common in many Asian cultures, where no shoes in the house. I just grew up that way. I didn't even know that other people didn't do that until I visited other homes. When leaving the house, for example, I would always say "ittekimasu," and my mom would say "ittarashai," which is it's like a Japanese thing where you kind of say farewell, like not farewell, but every time you leave the house, you say that, and the person who's still there. And then when you come back, you say "tadaima," which means like I'm here now, and the person would say "okaeri nasai," it's like welcome home. And I don't think it's common really to have like a set phrase that you say every time you leave and every time you come back. These are all things that are small little things that you are just taught from a young age and don't think about, don't really examine. Another thing would be chopsticks. When using chopsticks, you never touch your chopsticks to another person's chopsticks, because that's reserved for cremation. When your when a family member or a loved one dies, you cremate them and you pass the bones from the cremation to each other using chopsticks. So to touch chopsticks to chopsticks in everyday life, as if I was like passing a bit of beef or something to another person, that's a definite no-no. But again, you don't stop and think. You don't really consider you're just told as a child, no, you don't do that. And you're like, okay, fair enough. And then continue with your life. So it was hard. It's hard for me to sort of extract tradition from what I consider just normal life to be, if that makes sense.
No, I think that a good thing that we brought up is that I've noticed that, yeah, a lot of times what we're taught as kids, what we do, it just becomes so normal we don't even think about it. But like, for example, when my Chinese friend visited me, he would ask, why do you guys do this? Why do you guys do that? And that's when you're like, oh yeah, why do we do that? It usually takes someone from another place who is very inquisitive. Oh, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Like, oh, why does fork go here? Why does knife go here? And that's when, like, me and my family was like, oh yeah, why do you could kind of re-examine things to a bit. So but a lot of people, they may not encounter that, but I find that really interesting. Or likewise, if you're visiting someone else from a different culture, you can do the same thing, and they may think, okay, yeah, we do this, but oh yeah. So that is kind of a neat thing. But I completely agree. There's so many things we do that are just like literally subconscious.
Oh, I guess. Well, there's tradition. There's a lot of tradition within it. So I do
sport.
I do a martial art called kendo, which is
kendo, yes,
means way of the sword. It's a Japanese. I think it was a way. My mother did it when she was in high school, but she had to give it up. So I think it was my parents wanting me to reconnect with sort of like a very traditional aspect of Japanese culture. And I have to say it, I went through waves of loving it and hating it, just because I don't know if other people have experienced this, but when you do an activity, and I can't really speak for everyone, but a lot of the Asian people that I know is if you're doing an activity, your parents won't let you quit it. They're like, until you're about 18, your decision making with regards to activities is not your own. Your parents get to dictate what you do. When you're 18 and maybe they're less worried about you, you've got into university, you've got your high level piano or high level sporting activity under your belt, then they sort of relax. But before that point, you're kind of stuck with it. But I love it now, and I'm glad that. I think it's hard because as a child, it can be with so much going on, it can be very easy just to want to quit for the sake of quitting. But unless you, I think it's only worth quitting when you find something that you love more, rather than just quitting and just doing nothing. So I am grateful that they did push me, but at the time it was sometimes a struggle.
Well, let's say everything is clear in retrospect, and it's like, when you're a kid, you're like, why do I have to do all this? Why do my parents make me do this? But later in life, like, oh wow, learning these skills can be useful. But at the time, it's hard to visualize that because you don't have anything to really compare to at that point in your life. Or at least a lot of kids don't.
Yeah. So both of my parents are half Japanese, and my dad's grandma immigrated from Japan to Hawaii. And she wanted to have American kids. So they were like very like Hawaiian Japanese. My mom's mom was in the camps and she married the white man. So my mom grew up in Hawaii too, but she didn't learn Japanese. Her mom wanted her kids to be Americans, because like being in prisons can do that to you. One thing that was interesting though is that my grandma was she had a large group of siblings. She was one of the few ones to marry outside of the Japanese race. So when we visit the rest of the siblings in California, it's like this big Japanese American community. But because my grandma married a white man and then they were raised in Hawaii, both of my parents grew up really culturally Hawaiian. So I didn't grow up doing a lot of Japanese things. And, you know, Hawaii has such a mix of like Asian cultures already. So we grew up eating like rice every night. Because like everyone in Hawaii has like a rice cooker, just like in Japan, just like probably in other parts of Asia. We use chopsticks. Whenever we have parties, we have like luau's. We get Hawaiian food for it. Like I'm having a birthday party on Sunday and I'm making guava cupcakes. We have guava juice in our fridge. So like I carry some of that with me, but it's more like Hawaiian. It's interesting because I think that my mom can speak a little Japanese, and growing up in Hawaii and being Japanese, like they did know stuff about their culture, but I noticed that the Japanese culture came out more with my mom when I started dating Callum again. It probably helped like renew all of our interest in our Japanese culture because Callum, I feel, is more culturally Japanese than me. And being a British Japanese, he doesn't have the same legacy that Japanese Americans do of like being in prison during the war. And he's Nisei, I'm Yonsei. So he's second generation and I'm fourth generation. So there's not like a whole lot of specific Japanese traditions I can think of, but kind of more like the mix of all of the Asian races that comes together in Hawaii. So I feel like I grew up more like Hawaiian Asian, kind of with the rice, the chopsticks, and then specifically Hawaiian with our aloha shirts. And we would get Hawaiian food whenever we have parties. We have pineapples everywhere. My dad plays the uke and he does stand-up paddleboarding. And I used to outrigger canoe with him when I was younger, because that's one thing my dad loves is paddling.
Your whole family, you and your siblings all have Hawaiian names.
Oh yeah, me and my siblings all have Hawaiian names. Malia's Hawaiian. My brother's name is Keone. My sister's name is Nalani. Our dog's name is Shaka. So like being Hawaiian has always been the big thing, really.
So in one way, you could say that the environment there is kind of, you create like a more of a hybridized culture in a way because of all the different inputs and how they've all kind of coalesced and they're forming something more mixed and new, but they're still retain in essence what they are, but they're kind of more of a fusion going on.
Yeah, and then like I guess our white like European side still comes out too, because me and my dad are the only ones that look more, I don't know how to say this, more like non-white. My mom's half Japanese, but she and her siblings, you can't tell unless you know. A lot of people think they're white. My brother, he was born blonde. He has blue eyes. He's a brunette now, but he looks so white. He gets, I like to say that he gets white male privilege while also the added privilege of being a minority because he's so white passing. And then my sister, I think people think she looks Hispanic. And
a bit of everything in the family, you could say.
Yeah, and then I've met like in Illinois when I lived there, I've met some Mexican people and they thought I was Mexican. So they would speak Spanish to me and I was like, I don't know Spanish. And I met one of my sorority sisters was Mexican and I met her, I thought she was half Japanese. So overall very interesting, and just it's amazing when different places how people may approach you based on preconceived notions, or this person looks like me, and then you're like, oh, it's not. As I say, never assume anything from my experiences. Yeah, so I'm just basically like super mixed, which is why I asked Callum to be on here to represent Japan.
Well, thank you, Malia. And then Sarah, what about you?
Well, for me, when I came to United States, I first stayed in the Cambodian community. So pretty much just eat Asian food and doing things with the Cambodian community. And then after I got married, I moved away. My husband lived away from live in another state. And he's pretty much in the non-Asian community. So that's when I learned to adapt. I adapt very well. But live in the Cambodian household, it doesn't make much difference. Only outside that is a little bit different. But inside the house, we just eat the same food, we just speak the same language and all that. It's not too much a big deal. But as the time go on, right now, we pretty much assimilate into the American culture. I would say I don't do much of the traditional way anymore. So everything is more like American way. The only thing that Asian way is the food. We still eat rice, we still eat the Asian food, we still eat curry, and so and we still speak the language if we want to, but we don't. We speak English at the home. So so I would say like 80% have been diverted away from the tradition, from the heritage. Plus, I changed my faith. My husband is a Christian, so I became a Christian. So that's totally different. That's changed a lot, because when you change the faith, all the tradition that we used to do, it's related to the religion. So once you change the faith, you change everything. So that's how I transition into the new lifestyle.
Very well put, and I think there's definitely a trend here with the role of faith in where you are in society, and how that very well said. And also that leads into the next question I want to ask, and that is, of course, on food. And what are some of your favorite exotic foods, or what are some foods that you enjoy that maybe others around you that are like, well, like, what is that, or they think is strange or different? Yeah.
Okay, now you're talking my language. I love food and I love to explore, but I would say that the two most exotic foods that I enjoy that probably people, cringe at are balut and, fertilized duck eggs that have been incubated for like 2 weeks, and durian.
Durian, yes.
Fruit that tastes creamy and sweet, like custard. Like if you can get past the smell, which is funny because like Anthony Bourdain loved durian, right? And then on the flip side, you have was it Andrew Zimmern, who is the bizarre foods guy, and he'll eat anything that's totally bizarre and weird, but he hates durian. I don't understand that. But anyways, those are my two things that I absolutely love, and people just don't enjoy that as much as I do.
Well, Amy, as soon as you said durian, that brings up a very hilarious memory. And I remember the first time I introduced durian to my family at a Chinese restaurant in St. Louis, and I got them some durian cakes. They about died. I thought it was good, but they about died, and they were like, "What the heck did you give us?" Like this, and I'm like, "It's durian. It's good." And their reaction, I still remember it like millisecond by millisecond, watching their faces go from "what is this" to like, "Oh my God, what is this?"
Oh yeah, it's like eating a sewage plant, but it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, I find it's good. It's just that after I eat so much, I'm like, okay, I'm done. It's quite strong, so it's good, but up to a certain point, then it starts to get overpowering. But that's at least me.
Yep.
Amy, if ever you get the chance to visit Singapore, I'll let you know about where they have these durian stalls, like on the side of the road. So it's essentially like, instead of a fruit stall, it's a durian stall, and they actually have like tables, and they give you like plastic gloves, and they're usually open 24 hours. So you can like go there any time of the day, pick a durian that you like, they hack it in half, and then you just sit at a table with like a group of friends, and you eat them with your hands, like on the side of the street. I really miss those days. I don't know when we're going to be able to do that again, but you mentioned durian, like Singapore.
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
Yeah. So I'm not a huge fan of durian, even if I grew up in Indonesia. I'm not a huge fan. But I would say probably like the two most exotic foods, which are not at all exotic in the Philippines, are like normal, would be, one of them would be sisig, which is like fried pork cheek. That they fry with like some vegetables and like coconut milk, and I think it's coconut milk. It's delicious. I'm not a big fan of pork, but like it's delicious. And then another thing that I really like is something called dinuguan, which is I don't know how to translate it directly into English, but it just means like the blooded or like bloody something, and it's made with like pork innards, and the sauce is made with like vinegar and pork's blood, which when you hear it, like even when I was a kid, I was like, would never, not going to touch it, sounds too crazy. And then my parents were like, just try it once. And then after trying it that one time, whenever it's on the table, I'll take some.
Yeah, whenever I tell people like some things I've tried as well overseas, and as soon as I start mentioning the word blood, they all start losing it. Well,
But I
really
think
interesting,
it's
though.
probably the most like most exotic foods. I'm Asian, but unlike most Asian families, my parents didn't insist on eating rice every night, so I'm more accustomed to not eating rice actually.
Well, Angela, you've given me two things to look forward to trying if I ever visit the Philippines.
Callum loves food, so
Yeah,
this
I
might
mean,
take a while.
Japan has a lot of dishes that I think people would be a bit apprehensive.
Well, maybe you could pick a couple of the most extreme cases, maybe.
We ate some cod sperm on Christmas.
Okay.
That was horrible.
So there's a dish called shirako, which is, I'm not sure what the fish is. I mean, it's
Cod sperm.
It's more the sack,
Literally
I think.
sperm.
It's more the sperm sack, but it's delicious. It's light. It's creamy, but it's got a consistency similar to
creamy.
It like brushes me out.
No, so she's acting up now, but before she knew what it was, she thought it was very good.
No, I didn't. I never said that. Okay, so I took Callum for this like really expensive meal on Christmas because his birthday is December 10th, and I drank a lot of wine because I knew that I was going to be served things I didn't want to eat, so that I would be drunk when I would eat it. And that was how I got it down. Callum was like, "It's fish," and I was like, "I know this isn't fish, but I'm just going to eat it because I have a lot of allergies," and they all prepared all of my meal really special for me because of all my allergies, and they were watching me, and I was like, damn it, I have to eat this. I have to eat it all. So I drank a lot of wine, and but I did not enjoy it. I was like, okay, it's fine.
I think it's kind of an Asian thing to use all the parts of the animal or fish, which I think can be a bit misunderstood in other cultures. But
for sure, yes.
In the UK, you've got black pudding, which is similar to what Angela was mentioning. It's like a blood sausage, and people will eat that quite happily with their fried breakfasts on a Sunday morning, but we'll find stuff like, I don't know, cod sprout.
I think for a lot of people, it's not even the dish itself. It's just the visualization and thinking about it that gets you.
Well, that's the mistake. See, you've got to just shut that out and just enjoy the meal.
You also like
natto.
Unagi? Oh, natto.
Natto is fermented soybeans. Sorry, I'm taking too much time on this, but yeah, natto is fermented soybeans. It has a peculiar smell that for a lot of people just turns them off completely.
Is that like the stinky tofu, as they say?
They're brown beans, very sticky. So you normally you add a bit of sauce and mustard to loosen it up, and then you typically have it on hot rice. Some people have it on toast. Okay,
that's because when you said that, I immediately thought of when I was in China. They have what's called a chou tofu, which means like stinky tofu, and literally, like the smell will about kill you. I mean, it tastes pretty well, but the smell you literally have to like pinch your nose when you eat it, otherwise it'll like knock you out.
Right.
And even some of the Chinese can't stand it. So it's something some of the locals can take it versus others can't.
Yeah, natto is also divisive here. A lot of Japanese people don't like it. Don't enjoy the smell. So,
gotcha. Right. And Sarah, what about you?
The food that I like the most is not really exotic, but it's exotic compared to the people that eat mild food. Curry. The spicier is the better for me.
So we have a spice fan here.
Yeah, hot and spicy. So that's my favorite food.
All right. No, very cool. And, more food to try. And, I think, whenever you travel or, you're trying something new or going somewhere different, I think part of that is trying the new foods, kind of put your standards aside. Of course, safety is first and foremost, but try new foods because I've traveled with people and they're like, I can't try this, I can't try that. I'm like, then why are you even here?
Yeah, if I bring my friend to Asian restaurant and some exotic restaurant, they serve fish from head to tail, right? So they just flip out. They say, oh,
Yep.
they cannot stand seeing the head and the tail and the whole fish on the plate. But we get used to it. That's natural.
Yeah.
And people fight over the eyes, the fish eyes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm so used to that now. I mean, I really enjoy it. But if I ever took my family to a place like that, they'd probably flip out completely.
Oh, it still freaks me out. I'm a bit of a picky eater. Italian food's my favorite.
Gotcha. And that leads into the next point I want to bring up is, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some common customs in your daily life? I mean, you kind of going off our earlier question, but for yourself, what are maybe a couple of very common customs you follow on a daily basis that's kind of more linked to your ancestry, culture, heritage, etc.?
Well, Callum actually touched on this, and that is taking your shoes off when you enter Asian households, right? I am a stickler for that. And I think people need to understand the reason why we are sticklers for that. Historically, traditionally, culturally, whatever, the Asian household is all about doing everything on the floor. We eat on the floor, we prepare our food on the floor, we sleep on the floor, we play games, we sew, we do everything on the floor. And so when you walk in, it's respectful to take off your shoes because you don't want to track in the dirt and the outside world into a peaceful haven, right? And so, living in the States and I see my American counterparts and Preston, my son's friends coming in, it's like, they know now the first thing they need to do is either leave their shoes at the door or outside. So that's my number one thing that I love to stick with. But the other thing is money for weddings, funerals, birthdays, holidays, whatever it is. That's one custom that I keep alive because things are expensive, and so I'd rather get money to help pay for that versus another KitchenAid or a plate. So yep. Sean just showed up some money envelopes. That's exactly what I want.
It's interesting that one of the biggest things people associate with Asian tradition and culture is the need to take your shoes off before you enter the house, because I practice that now, but growing up, my parents were really not strict about it. So it was only once I actually moved to Singapore to work and spending more time with it was the first time in my life I would say that most of my friends were of an Asian background. Growing up, most of my friends were always from Western backgrounds. So when I moved to Singapore, it was the first time I became friends with Asians who grew up in Asia, and they were shocked at my lack of taking off of shoes whenever I would visit their houses because it was not something that I grew up with. So I find that interesting. But I guess in terms of other Filipino traditions that I practice on a day-to-day basis, probably just has to do with respecting elders. So I would say similar to what you would have in other Asian cultures, we have specific words that we use to address people who are older than us. So it, different depending on whether they're closer in age, but still older, or if they're like your parents' friends, for example. And that changes depending on whether I'm interacting with Filipinos or Indonesians. And yeah, even in Singapore with some certain terms that you use as a form of respect to Chinese elders. And yeah, that's probably it, I would say. Everything else, as I mentioned earlier, is kind of related to faith. So it's not specific to Filipino culture.
Yeah, I think I mentioned sort of the daily customs that I implement in the last question. Struggling to think any more. Do you?
I have answers, yes.
Yeah, okay. Should we go straight to that?
So this is what I've picked up in Japan because I didn't do this growing up either. Same with the shoe thing with Angela. My family didn't really do that much. I like how in Japan you enter and there's this, it's very obvious. This is where your shoes go. So then you keep going. Yeah. So the stuff I've picked up in Japan is the Callum started making all the noises that the Japanese people make whenever they exert any effort. Please make some noises.
It's just things. Yeah, it's like yosho.
He goes to pick something up and he's like,
it's just yeah, I don't know. I just.
And then the bowing, the always bowing.
Let's go to someone.
Yeah, so this is like a little funny story because I can't really speak Japanese, but I interact with Japanese work culture way more than Callum does. And when I leave the kindergartens I work at, I go to the office and I go, arigatou gozaimasu, otsukare desu. And then one of the last kindergartens I was at, they giggled at me. Callum said it's because I can't speak Japanese, but I did something that only Japanese people do.
Yeah. So
there's like the polite things like that.
Yeah, so when leaving the office, you typically say "otsukare sama desu," which means like "well done for your hard work," and that's something that exists in pretty much all. I can't say all, but most Japanese companies, you will do that.
Yeah, you have to. But then also, we belong to a gym here, and after the end of our classes in the locker rooms, the people will say to us, "Otsukare sama desu."
Yeah.
So I notice it's not just like leaving work; it's like leaving the gym.
Yeah, it's like when you've done some work in some form, I guess.
So you could say like the customs and ceremony are very, very important. Like anytime you do something, a task, or whether it's more work or personal, there's always like you have to like acknowledge it, or there's.
Yeah, like if I was to hand this to Callum, I can't be like this. I have to go like this.
Yeah, it's more for business cards.
But no, when I'm at work, whenever people hand me something, they hand it to me with two hands.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's a lot of aspects which are, well, this is the way it's always been done, so we're not going to change it now.
Continuation, like, don't question this is how things are done, and and that's one thing I've noticed from a few of my friends who also have worked in Japan, that they really emphasize the ceremony, the order, and kind of in a way hierarchy within a company, how people are supposed to act and how you interact with people at different levels of the company, so on and so forth. So that's very interesting, because here in the US there is that, but it's much more watered down, I would say.
Less rigid.
Yeah.
And then Sarah, what about you?
Well, the thing that I'm still practicing is when I'm among the Cambodian people, I still salute with like this, my two hands together, and instead of shaking hands. So it's no handshake in Cambodian culture. It's only like this. So we still do that among our own people, but with the American, we don't do that. We do handshake, and we still continue to respect the older people, and we still cook our own meal, our own food at home. we go
more universal trends here.
Yeah, we go to the Asian store, Asian market, and buy all the ingredient and vegetable and everything, and we make our own meal, so we don't eat out that much. So we are very health conscious to keep our health healthy.
Well, that's never a bad thing. I definitely will say I definitely thinned down a bit when I was in China. I never was overweight by any means, but I definitely thinned down a bit because of the diet. But yeah, and that leads into another good point, and that is, what are the holidays you celebrate? I know there are some universal ones, but I mean, for each of your backgrounds, what are some like maybe like the most important holidays in kind of a nutshell?
I think in the Vietnamese culture, everybody knows that the Lunar New Year and the Mid-Autumn Festival are pretty huge festivals and things that we celebrate. So I'm going to talk a little bit about funerals. Funerals are actually pretty big deals in the Vietnamese culture. I would imagine maybe in other cultures too, but it's our way to pay respect to the deceased. It's also a way for us to prepare them for the afterlife, because we believe there is an afterlife. And usually you'll see that where in the American culture, people wear black to funerals. In the Vietnamese culture, we wear white. And the closer you are to the deceased, you are usually dressed from head to toe in a headband and a robe in white. And if you're an extended family member, then you just wear the white headband. But there's always a lot of food. There's a lot, usually it's whatever the deceased loves to eat is what is prepared. There's a lot of music. And if you're Buddhist, we usually have a monk that comes and does the chanting and the prayers. And so it's a big, big deal. And we also celebrate this for at least, I think, 49 days, where you're always preparing food to celebrate and for the deceased, to honor their life, right? But then after 100 days, you have another celebration, and it's to mark the ending of the mourning. So for me, when my mom passed away, I had to learn all of this stuff. And I was cooking up a storm. So yeah, that's, for me, the funeral is a big thing to celebrate. It's someone's life, right?
I would say in the Philippines, big holiday, Christmas, just because it's and Christmas is done it's a huge affair, and it's really probably the one time a year that kind of everyone gets off. So it's an opportunity for everyone in the family to really come together. And that's always how I viewed Christmas, as like a very crowded, loud, fun affair with not just my family, but with my extended family as well. And there's a lot of effort made into, bringing everyone together. But I also grew up in Indonesia. So during like Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr, those are holidays as well that, although I didn't directly celebrate them, was affected by it. And it's interesting that, it happens at different times of the year, but the stories are the same. There's, it's about profits, and it's about, saving, your faith and valuing family. So it's growing up the way I did was cool because my school had like over 65 nationalities, so many different religions represented. So with all of those different religions represented, we were made aware of all of the different holidays from each religion and for each country, and we get days off. So there would be periods of like 3 months where we would not have a full week of school just because there was a holiday. So it was.
Yeah, kids here would love that.
yeah, it was great. It was really great. My parents were like, "Why are you never in school?" But yeah, I would say Christmas is the big one in the Philippines, and we celebrate probably we get a day off for every saint, which is a lot of saints.
So there's hella holidays. My work calendar when I was working full-time last year, there's so many random holidays throughout the entire year.
In Japan. We personally don't celebrate any of them. Maybe Callum does without me. I don't know. But I think New Year's is the big one here. New Year's and Obon. New Year's, Obon, and a lot of them tend to coincide with, so you have Golden Week, you have Obon, and you have New Year's. I think it's they're widely celebrated because one's allowed to taking holiday, taking paid holiday in Japanese work culture it's allowed, but it's legally allowed, but you'll get punished if you take it off. You won't get punished. Yes, you will. You won't get punished. Yes, you will. He didn't work at a Japanese company. Yes, but you won't get punished. It's just, you won't get punished by your company, but you might be treated.
Maybe you could say a little intimidated, or there's a lot of pressure to keep working. It's one of those indirect things. It ties into sort of the Japanese concept of putting the community before the individual. So when you're taking paid holiday, you're effectively putting more work on the shoulders of your colleagues, and it's seen as a more selfish thing to do. Whereas in the UK, it's more no, we work hard, we're entitled to our time off. No one's going to think if the guy across from me wants to take his holiday in summer, that's his right. Absolutely, he should do that. He'll do the same for me. I'll take on his work, but then when it's my turn to go on holiday,
he'll take on more work.
And that's how it should be.
And that's how it should be. But in Japan,
I have a lot of views about Japanese work culture that are not positive.
Yeah, but in any case, the main celebrations for us are the Christian Easter,
we celebrate
Easter
Christmas
and Christmas.
We like Halloween.
Yeah.
I love Thanksgiving, but Callum's not American, and I usually have to work. We didn't do anything for Easter.
No.
Like
but growing up, I did.
Yeah, my family's Catholic, so we did the Catholic stuff and the American holidays. Japan, it's like Golden Week, Obon, which is in August, New Year's. So those are the 3 times a year where people travel. So they're the most expensive times to travel. So Golden Week is like, the school year is April to March. So Golden Week, for some reason, is end of April, beginning of May. So like they start school for like maybe 3 weeks, and then they have like a week off. And that's like the most expensive time to travel in Japan. And then Obon is in August, so that's kind of like summer holidays for the kids, but it's like 1 week. It's not that long.
It's a lantern festival.
Yeah, it's a festival for like the dead. And New Year's, everyone goes to like the shrine on New Year's Day. So New Year's Eve isn't really like a big thing like it is in the West.
And kids, you would, as a child, I don't think Malia had this, but on New Year's you get otoshidama, which is where you get money from your grandparents in an envelope. And it's typically quite a lot.
I didn't get any money.
Yeah, but
I know. I'm like, dang, I must have been missing out because we got stuff. But yeah, my Chinese friends, and they're like, like, oh, hongbao, red packets, or whatever it is. It's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I got a red packet once from Chinese neighbors.
Nice.
Yeah, I never got red packets either. Which I don't know. I just my dad's side of the family is like part is ethnically Chinese. Like I've got Chinese roots. But I feel like with my family, they just kind of picked and chose like which parts of like heritage and tradition that they themselves liked, and then just only did that with my brother and I, because I even like, growing up, I didn't find out about Santa. I didn't know that he existed. Like I didn't know who this like big guy was until I was about 5, because one of my mom's friends asked me if I'd written a letter to Santa, and I was like, who's Santa? And then I asked my parents about it, and then I feel like they were really disappointed that I found out, because I think they were like purposefully like trying to hide it from me so that they wouldn't have to buy me another present. But yeah, just a little tidbit.
And then Sarah, what would you say? What would you say for you?
Well, in Cambodia, we celebrate, the biggest celebration is the New Year, the Lunar New Year. It's slightly different from Chinese and Vietnamese. We celebrate in April, somewhere around the middle of April. So Cambodian, Thai, and Lao, we all celebrate the same time of the year. That's our New Year celebration. And I remember we celebrate the memorial type of time to remember the deceased, our ancestor, and so on. But now that I'm here, I don't do the memorial type of holiday anymore. I don't do the New Year, the Lunar New Year anymore, because I'm more adopted into a new faith. So I'm more like Christmas, New Year, Easter, and more like a religious holiday. So that's what I'm currently doing for the last 30 years.
Oh, very nice. All very good points, and I really appreciate the in-depth discussion on all these topics here. This will conclude part 1 of this episode. As part 2, we will go into other topics. But I just want to thank everyone for joining this episode, and I look forward to meeting you all again on part 2 as we continue to delve into these topics and further discuss how cultural elements, our heritage, past experiences, current experiences, so on and so forth, how they all shape us and define who we are as people and in the societies that we engage with. So everyone, I hope you've really enjoyed this episode. Please let us know what you think by emailing us at internationalimmersionpodcast@gmail.com, or check out our social media on Facebook, International Immersion, and Instagram of the same name. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you, and tune in for part 2 coming soon.